Hi everyone, Comic Reviewer here. This time reviewing on Season 1 of Little Britain. Now, as you know, Little Britain was meant to be a British comedy sketch series that began as a radio show all the way back in 2000, with its pilot back in August the 3rd, 2000, and eventually got picked up as a TV series years later. And the premise of Little Britain is meant to have been more of a joke, a sort of satire on British culture, as it was meant to joke mainly about the certain tropes of British things, like chavs, basically the lower class environments, and basically big time or fading stars. And I think the first season tries to capture this well. And pretty much the start of each episode features the Little Britain characters in a certain fiasco or kind of situation or sort of sketch. In most of the sketches, we see how Vicky Pollard tries to come up with poor, pathetic excuses when in a situation. And throughout it, we see how she either has a sort of scheme to get alcohol, or sometimes basically makes up long sentences to get out of trouble. We see how Daffy Thomas tries to make himself seem like he's this big important guy and claims he's the only gay in the village in his town, even though there's thousands of them. And I think it works because there are people like Daffy Thomas who want to feel important and feel like they want to use themselves as a big pedestal. And you also did have Marjorie Dawes, who run a fat fighters course. Her character was maybe a joke on how people sort of fat shamed or sort of called others out for their weight without seeing their own flaws. And there were more lesser known Little Britain characters at the time. One, you also had Jason and his friend Gary. Now, Gary pretty much had his nan, sister, and mum, and the joke was that Jason had feelings for his friend's nan, and led to these sort of like situations where he tried to hit on her. And there was meant to be this Scottish guy who was meant to act all over the top, basically coming up with riddles, and it's meant to be a joke on the old classic folklore Scottish culture. And there was also meant to have Dickie Warble, who was meant to be this big fading star, and at the same time was shown to be bitter that he now works at a DIY shop. Now, I think what the first season gets right, it kind of foreshadows what your life is going to be years later. For example, one bit you have a kid going to the principal's office asking about a potential planned careers, and the joke about the whole robotic teacher thing is a joke on how teachers look down on you and don't really see your full potential. And I think it's kind of ironic, as there are teachers out there who don't see your potential. And another joke I think that does work is how it's meant to sort of joke with fading stars or writers who try to come up with poor ideas. For example, when you have Dame Sally Merkham, who tries to write this big story, anything she does, she tries to quickly throw away, or basically tries to make sentences longer, which I think suits the character well. And I think what's interesting is the Scottish guy, Lady Sally Merkham, and even basically a famous athlete in that, don't really appear in the other seasons. The Scottish guy was meant to be used in a planned third season of what they were going to do with him, but just swept it under the rug. And I think it's a shame that because of PC culture, because of the current century, a lot of people claim to sort of see the show misuse its criticism. The joke was Little Britain was meant to be a joke on certain tropes. It wasn't trying to be too offensive. And I think it's a shame because Little Britain had a lot of good ideas. And I think at the same time, I do see it more as the 2000 version of Harry Hanford and Chums, as some characters do fit the same trope, like, say, Vicky Pollard with Kevin the teenager, basically Lou and Andy with the slobs, and so many things. And I think at the same time, the first season's jokes still work, but if you've seen it loads of times like I do, you know it's going to become a bit dull and grey. But I think at the same time, if it kept up with all its specials all the way to 2020, you know you've got a comedy that did work. So I think, to me, Little Britain is a show I think had potential, but it's a shame a lot of people criticise it. It was joking about the certain tropes of British culture that we've all seen now and now. If you were living in Portsmouth, London, Gloucester, Northampton, and so on. So I think it still deserves a thumbs up. Still good, and still alright. So, Comic Reviewer here, signing out.